Greetings, greetings, greetings. This is Troy Lamel Stovall, the CEO at TEDCO. First of all, thank you all for continuing the great responses and the feedback we're getting on these TEDCO Talks. And thank you all for the support of the ecosystem. You know, I've been here a little over 2 years at TEDCO, and we've done almost 50 of these TEDCO Talks. And we thought as we approach 50, we would make this one a little more personal. And I think as you've heard me say over the course of these 2 years, I've had a journey that took me to be at a number of HBCUs, to be a senior level executive. And my very first one was at Jackson State University. And the young man who brought me in there ended up asking me to serve at 2 more institutions of higher learning with him, as he has been a president / chancellor at 3 HBCUs. And I consider him not just my boss, my friend and mentor, and someone who I look up to, and that's President Ronald Mason, president of the University of the District of Columbia. And yes, I'm wearing my UDC hoodie. I got my, Ron, this is the hat from the executive PhD program.
Ah, okay. Very
exactly. Good. Yeah. So Ron, thanks again for being on this today.
Good morning, Mr. Troy TEDCO Stovall. Good to see you today. All HBCU'd up.
Yes, exactly. So gonna have a little fun and we'll get into it. So let me, so just so people get a sense of how long Ron and I've been together. So I was in Jackson working for a company called Gulf South. I was running that company for, it was a family office. And Ron took over at Jackson. It was 99.
2000, yeah.
2000. And then I started in 99. And this gentleman's name, John Palmer, had been a supporter of Jackson State. And because of the relationship, he decided to, because Ron came in on there, he decided to support it even more. And then Ron went after, at that time, one of the largest donations to an HBCU. It was a huge building that an insurance company had, and we were involved in helping him think about that. And through a number of other things, he came on and asked me to come on and be his CFO, COO. So we've known each other, like since 2000, and then we've been at 3 institutions together. So it's been a great journey. So that means we know a lot about one another. So that means this is going to be interesting. So my first question, Ron, time of the day. What's the time that Ron really is energized?
What's the time that I'm energized?
Yeah, time of the day.
Oh, man. I'm pretty much energized after my first cup of coffee.
Okay.
And I'm pretty much bopping till I drop in the evening, you know. It just depends on the day, but there's always something during the day. If you do the kind of work that we do, that requires you to ratchet up your energy.
So speaking, go ahead, finish.
Well, and so, I'm pretty much energized from the time I get up to the time I go to sleep, and then I sleep and get up and do it again.
So again, for those that don't know, Ron is a lawyer by training, but has been in higher ed for most of his career. But he has another persona, and so he fashions himself as a rapper. And so
I prefer a more hip-hopetry artist, but I get your point.
Okay, hip-hopetry artist, and so he's got a couple of code names he's gone by over the time. RX, prescription, a couple other. So I want to see, I'm going to put you on the spot. You got any lines you want to throw? See?
No, I do not, but just so it's clear, the pseudonym is RX because my words are the medicine that you need.
Wow.
And over the years, I've put together a few pieces, spoken word, but it's a combination of hip hop and poetry.
Yes, it is.
And I've actually used them to teach courses where the students use the audios to discuss topics that I think help them understand the world better. It's all message music, as I call it. And look, since you're going to throw that out on me, let me just go back to what you started with to give people the whole story. Because when I first went to Jackson, I was at the City Club, and everybody said, you got to meet this guy. He's God's gift to venture capital. And so I met Troy Stovall, and the guy he's talking about that he worked with actually ended up being the ambassador to Portugal. And Troy got me my first grant when I was at Jackson State, which ended up funding the strategic plan that we put together called Vision 2020, and we built the university based on that plan. So in many ways, Troy was key to the future of what I think is one of the best HBCUs in America today.
Well,
I give you props on that, Troy.
I appreciate that, and I look while we on that same point. Thank you for that, and I've had a great career. But I say the work we did, and I say we did at Jackson State was some of the best work I've done as a professional. I mean, just not just from the building, beautiful campus, but just the infrastructure that we left there, the financial, the way we thought the way an HBCU should be.
I think so. And the one statistic nobody mentions is that when we got there, the graduation rate was 27%.
Yep.
When we left, it was 47%. And I'm sure that a lot of the work we did then ended up with Deion Sanders being there today. So we're going to claim that one too.
We're going to claim exactly. I don't know if you remember one of the things you told me at the club. You say, wouldn't you want to be at a campus where you had students that walk around that's at that time 1,400 on the SAT and could barely spell SAT? What if we had both of those types of students and we thought we could do that at Jackson State? I don't know if you remember telling me that. Yep. And we did. Then that's what we tried to build there at Jackson State.
And we were both a lot younger at the time. Go ahead.
Exactly. But I want to go back to just more about you. So what during this course again? You've been at Jackson. Started Tulane. People don't know you started at Tulane, and then from Tulane, and actually went to Columbia. So this is a man kind of like myself. We both were educated at predominantly white institutions, but has had a career at HBCUs, which is, I think, is always an intriguing part of both of our stories, that we both went to these Ivy League institutions, but we ended up, frankly, in the Deep South at Jackson and then Southern and obviously at UDC. And so I want to talk about that journey, Ron. Did you really see that was going to be your journey from Columbia to Tulane to Jackson State?
I never had a plan. And I was at Tulane 17 years and sat next to the president all 17 of those years.
Yeah.
And decided I didn't want to be a president because I saw what the work was like. But, the thing is, at Tulane, you never really felt like, at least I never really felt like it was my school because it was predominantly white. It was predominantly wealthy. And the few Black and brown students that were there, I got to work with, but it wasn't their school either. If you understand what I'm saying. And so, when the opportunity came, I made a conscious decision to switch to HBCUs. And I'll say this, HBCUs are institutional reflections of Black people, which you've heard me say, which means that they've always been denied access to wealth. And it's the hardest work I've ever done. And I'm sure it's some of the hardest work you've ever done. But it's a labor of love. And because it's a labor of love, it's a lot easier to get up and go to work each and every day. So it's never been a plan. Everything has sort of just come my way. But when it came my way, I found the opportunities to be worth the effort.
So as you think about that effort, as you think about kind of the footprints you've left at these three institutions, what do you look back on? And I know you don't like to look back because we've had this conversation where you don't like to necessarily look back, and I get that. But this is a time for you to be reflective. You've had three great presidencies. As you look back, kind of not just at any one institution, but across, is there a theme across that you look back and say, I can see it, how I left that footprint?
I'll say this. We just had our convocation to open the school year. And, I've just announced my retirement, so this is my last year. So I did more reflection than usual. And I think that every place we've been, we've left it better than we found it, which is really all you can ask with the time you have to work with. But the place I find most special and intriguing is UDC. And for this reason, it's less than 50 years old. It was thought of as one of the key institutions to the success of the democracy that George Washington and the founding fathers was putting together. I mean, he said it back then, right?
Yeah.
One was West Point, and one was the university in the District of Columbia. And if you think about it, I don't want to preach. I can get once I get started.
You go, bro.
Let me just put it this way. And so he said, a military academy and a university. The military academy is the America that we live. Conquest and empire. But the institution of higher learning, UDC, is really the America that we dream, which is community and the common good. And I think that this institution really does have a unique opportunity to help fulfill the dream of America and the idea that we call America because of where it is, what it is, and who and what it works for. And so, I'm not going to be here I'm at the mountaintop, but I won't be able to cross the river, but I could see it. I could see it coming. And I think this is going to be a very special institution, not only among HBCUs, but in higher education in general.
I think, it would be good for the audience to hear a little bit about the history of UDC, because I think a lot of people don't know about UDC. They don't know, we're in DC. It's the only public institution of higher learning in DC. People think that, there's others, but this is the only one. But there's a history that's intriguing about it. So if you want to give people a little bit of that.
Sure, I can do that. So we trace our roots back to 1851, minor school for colored girls. And then after desegregation in the 50s, it merged with Wilton School for white girls, and that became DC Teachers College. Then the federal government started a technical institute called Washington Technical Institute in the 60s, right, and a 4-year school called Federal City College. Those 3 schools, when DC got home rule, were merged to become the University of the District of Columbia in 1976. And I say merge loosely because it was 3 different schools or 3 different cultures, and the growing pains were serious. The UDC had 22 presidents and interim presidents over the course of about 45 years, which can tell you about the struggles. The early days was always bad press. When the control board came through, they cut the budget in half and cut it in half again. And so the chairman of the control board, recently, while you were here, said, look, of all the cuts we made, the ones we regret the most was UDC, right, because they were the deepest and the most impactful. And so when we came in 7.5 years ago, there was a lot of work to be done. But most of it was to settle things down and to set things on the right track. We've had a supportive mayor, we've had a supportive council, especially the chairman of the council, had a really good board of directors, and I never underestimate the power of being lucky. And so, we were lucky and in the right place at the right time. And I think now people understand that, we are the system of higher education, public higher education for the nation's capital. We're the pinnacle of the public education system in the nation's capital. We're building the kind of university, seamless, multi-credential pathways with multiple on and off ramps. You've heard me say it before, but it's where higher education should be and is struggling to get there. But because we're young, we're agile, we're mobile, we're able to build it almost from scratch in a way that I think is going to lead the way for higher education in the future.
So a lot I want to unpack there in the time we got. So I'm going to try. Let me see if I can do it. So one thing you gave me an accolade I want to get back and do. I was looking for the piece of paper, because you like paper. You think you're a tech guy, but you like paper. The piece of paper you showed me when you were trying to get me to come there, and I didn't want to come initially.
You never wanted to come, but you always came. So.
Well, that part is true. But I don't know if you remember, we talked about how enrollment was down. The mayor had just at that time cut a budget. We were worried about the accreditation process we were about to go into. I mean, there were some significant challenges. And I'd love to tell a story when that year later, we were sitting in that ballroom and the accrediting body, the whole university was at this thing. And folks, you got to understand, like Ron said, I mean, we had a bunch of presidents, a bunch of provosts. It was some significant issues. And the way the accreditation process, there's these standards you have to meet. And not only did we meet all the standards, we got commendations. 11 commendations. That just never happens. I've done this for a long time. That just doesn't happen just by accident. It happens because you're going to have leadership, but we had people who rallied. We end up fixing the enrollment, fixing the finances, fixing buildings, do all the other stuff. But that's leadership. I guess the point I want to let you know, that's leadership. And that was just a great first year.
Well, man, it is leadership, but I'll say this with all honesty. This institution has been through a lot, and to its credit, it is still here and still doing the work. And I've said that this is the best team I've ever worked with, and I think that's true. we had good people we worked with in the other schools that we were at, but this crew here is top notch, and which is one of the reasons I'm comfortable that going forward with the new president, there's enough of an infrastructure here that whoever walks in the door, if they're as good as I hope they will be, they'll just fall right into a really great team and continue to march toward a Super Bowl championship. If you remember my powerful.
Believe me, I do. So you mentioned, because higher ed right now, in writ large, is under attack. There's a lot of people questioning the value of higher ed, and you mentioned this notion of progression of degrees. And you talk a lot about how do you get stackable credentials. So I'd like you folks talk about that, because I talk about it too in what I do here at TEDCO, because particularly, this is why I must transition to the technology piece, particularly in some of the tech sectors, you don't need a degree. You can have credentials, you can have badging, and it's like, so talk about how you think about that and how UDC is helping folks with that.
Yeah, so, degrees are just credentials, right? Mm-hmm. And for example, with us, if you look at the technology pipeline, the technology workforce pipeline, you can start at basic coding, but end up being a electrical engineer or computer scientist. But there's hundreds of jobs in between and hundreds of levels of credentials that you can earn on your way, if you want to the ultimate goal, which is that engineering degree. But the thing to keep in mind is this, even having said that, that bachelor's degree is still the preferred credential. Mm-hmm. And because most of the jobs in DC, I think 77% in the DMV require a bachelor's degree, right? And so from our perspective, we want to offer every opportunity in the pipeline, but we want to push as many Black and brown people as higher and higher in that pipeline as we possibly can. Mm-hmm. For a lot of different reasons. One, because America needs the talent. And that's where a lot of the talent is, in these vast untapped resources of poor neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, and brown neighborhoods, right? But the other thing is that, it requires a different way of seeing the pipeline and understanding the challenges that are plugging holes in the pipeline, which brings me to our Developing America Workforce Nucleus.
I know it.
Project in Anacostia, right? Well, we're just rethinking how do you identify talent, how do you refine talent? We have a math teacher training institute that is training teachers how to teach lower income quartile students math, which is a different way and a different challenge from a learning perspective. And then we're setting up an early college at Anacostia High School that pushes down into the middle schools, pushes up to the university, and is connecting the pipeline all the way through so that, students can move further and further and further up that talent pipeline. We think it's something America's going to have to figure out because, the business model that we have now, if you think about it, our education system actually suppresses more talent than it produces, which is part of the challenge. And so we're focused on how to change the business model, and we're demonstrating it in Anacostia.
I love it. You love it.
Yeah.
And so stay on this technology piece, and I'm going to tie something you said earlier about wealth, or the lack of wealth in Black and brown communities, and the role technology has been the greatest enabler of wealth that the world has seen. Mm-hmm. Tying those things together, and both how you use technology to make some of these changes you've made, both at Jackson State and UDC and Southern and UDC, but also how it's going to help address that wealth creation piece.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of Digital Promise.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So I just got off that board, right? Only because I'm kind of scaling back in general. But the conversations we have there go something like this, and one of our mutual friends, who I'm not going to mention his name, but no. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I do, yeah.
You can make technology is a tool. And you can use that tool to enhance the learning process, but making that tool available in a way that it's usable across the entire learning spectrum, the learning needs of everybody is a different proposition, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can refine a tool and use it only for the people that can afford the tool, which is usually the top 10% of the population, right? And mm-hmm. so then you're just accelerating and making this current business model worse. But if you're intentionally developing and investing in the use of that tool, where, in the schools that don't usually have them, in the schools where the tool is not usually applied, then I think you have a better opportunity of increasing the flow of talent at every level for the workforce that America needs. And that's really the challenge. You can create tools, you can make them better, but it's who has access to them and who can use them and how you apply them that will ultimately make the difference.
The only thing I'll add to this, how you get people to participate. So the way we bring that for what you do at TEDCO is, how do we make sure that when we invest in, like I talk about the next Hopkins spin out, which happens a lot, how do we make sure that employee number 2, 3, or 4 in that Hopkins spin out has somebody from Bowie State or Coppin State or Morgan or UMES? How do we be intentional about creating that participation so that when that thing becomes, a great exit, what we call an exit event, that Coppin kid has some money in their pocket. And what do? They start the cycle all over again, but with their Coppin universe. Yeah,
and I mean, it's the ongoing conversation about the fact that HBCUs overproduce. Even though they're under-resourced, and imagine, the level of production that we could put out there if we had the infrastructure in place to do the work, right? And that requires an upfront investment. And recently, a few HBCUs have gotten the McKinsey type money, which candidly it's great, but it's still not catch-up money because there's a bigger hole there than we're filling. But that's only 10 or 12 HBCUs. There's like 100. And since UDC didn't get any of that McKinsey money, I want to put out a word about the rest of us that are doing equally good work, but just not as sexy at the moment.
Thank you for saying it. No problem. So like you said, you've already mentioned that this is coming to the end of this time at UDC. So what's next for Ron Mason? Because look, you've been a warrior for not just for students, but for equity and inclusion. You've been a warrior for social justice for me, and like I said, you've been a great mentor. I use a lot of the team that's listening. When you guys hear me do my little short phrases, that's the Masonisms that I picked up from him. Okay, the short and sweet stuff. I get it from him. But what's next for Ron?
I don't know, Troy. I'm still working on you a little bit, but we'll get there.
I know.
But who knows? I mean, look, I've always said that there's my job and my work. My job is running universities, and I feel like I've done pretty well at that. My work has always been to fight for justice, only because that's the way I'm wired. And so I'm thinking about it. I have an option to teach at our law school. I'm thinking about putting together a course on systems change. But the system I'd like to change is the system of white supremacy in America. And I think that there's legal pathways to attack that directly.
Yep.
People have talked to me about blogs and whatever else they're doing these days on social media. I got a book in my mind, but I think first thing I'm gonna do is rest. I got a sabbatical, and I just need to catch a breath, I think, and really think about what's next.
And you're gonna put out some more rap, some more hip hop.
I mean, and the funny thing is, man, I have. You're gonna laugh at this, but as I went back and looked at the pieces I've done so far, I think it's actually going to make a pretty good play, a musical, right?
A musical.
So, a musical, because it's hip hopetry, it's hip hop poetry, and so I've been working on a musical, and I'm talking to some of the theater people in town here about the possibility of, really trying to find out whether my estimation of my work is what the general public, whether the general public will agree. Yeah.
So people got to understand. So Ron texted me one morning, and Ebola has been his chief of staff forever. We both all been together forever. And he calls us in. He's all excited. We thinking something's wrong with the institution. No, he wants to show us this hip-hop music that he's done because he's been on his Apple thing. He's been in this garage music. He is so excited about how he has put this little piece together. And that was
I've gotten better. And look, one of the things that's happened, I did a war protest music video called "Hell of a Sin," right?
Yeah.
And it was all images from the internet put to music that we did, and YouTube banned it because they said it was too graphic. But it was all actual pictures. And so when I put my website together, I can brag about being banned from YouTube, as a draw to the site. So,
well, look, bro, I have told you this, but publicly, I did this interview a couple of years ago, and I got asked who had, because it's an interesting question. They asked me, what's your Mount Rushmore outside of your family, the folks who've had the most influence and impact on your career and your life. And I named you as one of those 4 people. And I mean that sincerely.
Well, thank you, Troy.
You decided to ask me to do that thing there. That's like, I'd never been at HBCU. Clearly, I'd never been a manager at HBCU and had no clue what I was doing. But you gave me the runway to do what I thought was some really cool stuff there at Jackson State and at UDC. And
I can honestly say, Troy, that it couldn't have happened without you.
Yeah.
So it's a mutual admiration society, my brother.
Yeah, my brother. Well, again, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Ron, for your service to HBCUs and to higher ed in general. Thank you for what you've done for me. Thank you all for listening. Appreciate you. This is Troy Lamel Stovall, the CEO of TEDCO. Be safe, be sane, be blessed, be healthy. Take care. Bye.